Hi, my name is Kevin Jones and my cameraman is Jordan Sislow. It is December the 11th, 2002, and today we are interviewing U.S. World War II vet Anthony Stagliano. What were you doing before you enlisted?
I worked at White Laundry as a wet spotter.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
No, I was on Dominic Street, just walking down the street, and I was past an old restaurant. And that's about all I could remember. 1941.
When did you enlist?
When? October 1942. Don't remember the exact date.
How old were you?
Now,
No, when you enlisted.
I was 20 years old.
Why did you pick the Navy?
Well, if I waited too long when you're drafted, you have no choice. But I could feel that it was getting close. I had gotten a notice, but I wasn't called up yet. So two of my friends and myself decided to join the Navy.
Where did you do your basic training?
Newport, Rhode Island.
What type of training did you receive?
Well, we only had 4 weeks, actually the usual military training, climbing ropes and jumping over things, tires, under barbed wire and stuff like that. We did the same routine, and swimming classes and so forth.
What ship were you assigned to?
I commissioned USS Renshaw, DD 499
What type of ship was it?
destroyer.
Where were you first shipped off to?
We were shipped off actually to Brooklyn Navy Yard, and then our ship in Bayonne, New Jersey.
What was it like aboard the ship?
What was it like? Well, strange, especially not being away from home. Strange, but you start making friends immediately. You're all in the same boat. No pun intended. And like I say, we were stationed in the barracks because the ship was being finished up. Then they had to go through a degaussing at Kearney, New Jersey. Degaussing means you're anti-magnetic, so you don't attract any water mines.
How was Navy food?
Navy food?
Yeah.
Well, I was fortunate. Navy food was very good on board ship.
What were your general duties on ship?
I was a radar fire control. Now, fire control, people misconstrue it to being fighting fires. It's firing radar controlled guns.
What would those be?
Well, they work off a computer. So being on a radar, you give range and bearings, you give them your plotting, and they're turning certain dials just like, actually I'd say 50, 60 years ago. And once the control man up there and director, he's adding these all up like on a computer. And then he's got one grip like a gun. And he fires every gun on that ship except a 40 millimeter and a 20, all the main battery. See, and it's swiveled, all radar controlled.
Okay. When did you first see action?
Oh, it was 1943, because we had a shakedown cruise. We go down, see if the ship's be able to stand the speed and the turns, and hit certain places like Caracas, Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, to pick up torpedoes, and you make runs. Then you go up and down the coast. We did 3 months of North Atlantic duty from Halifax, New Greenland, all the way down to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, keep patrolling for anti-sub. See, the destroyer is actually an anti-submarine ship. And then we were called down to take the battleship Massachusetts. We were the only escort to the Panama Canal to Guadalcanal. And that's where from there, so we were just mopping up Guadalcanal, although we had hit New Caledonia and Espiritu Santos. That's the staging grounds, you know, for the forward ships going up the line. And then we hit Guadalcanal, and across from Guadalcanal is an island called Tulagi. They really are desolate jungle, that's all it really is. And that's where we started our operations in the New Georgia group. Rendova, Falalabella, Colabangara, Munda, Barroco. These are all islands, and more or less the New Georgia group and the Shortland Islands. It was all the way up to Bougainville and Buca and Green Island. We operated through all of those. Our first action actually started early 1943. We were off of, bombing, shelling Munda airfields, bivouac areas.
One second.
Bivouac areas. There are stations, there are radar stations and barracks and so forth. And tried to just get them a little disorganized. But in the meantime, there's a couple of ships in front of us that started, we were almost dead in the water when you're doing that, and we lost the USS Gwin, a destroyer, got torpedoed. So naturally, you get to fire, you start moving around, you start speeding up as fast as possible and getting out of there. Well, some of the ships keep the submarine down so we can just get out. And like I say, I can go on with different things that have happened. I can't give you exact dates per se. And then another time we were going up to Colabangara. We had to do the same thing, bombarding like hell. But the fact remained is, we always followed the flagship. But the flagship would always put us in front. Now you're going into a harbor, that's an enemy harbor, that's mined. So your submarine goes in there during the night and he plots it. Plots where the minefields are so we can get a course of speed to go in there. So you're going in there at approximately 38 knots, which is mile and 8 per knot. That's almost 41 miles an hour. Now you got a big tin can that's going 41 miles an hour in there, and you're firing like crazy. You're firing as you're going in, but we don't know from 1 hour to the next where we noticed going in there. Did they move the minefields over while we were getting ready to come back? We had no idea. So you're scared. You're frightened half to death. And I know there's been accidents by some of the gunners. Because these are our first engagements. You know, you're firing, and you're getting out of there as fast as you can. You can hear these shore batteries firing over us, going over your head. It sounds like freight trains going over your head. Awful sounds they make. And you got short mortars and so forth trying to get these ships. There were only 2 of us. And when we got out of there, just as the task force came up, and that was the same night that the cruiser Helena got sunk. Just, I remember the Helena was one of them that got sunk. Then, now this is all like, I remember it like it was yesterday. When we were going up to Barroco, it's middle of the night, moonlit night. It was a gorgeous night. And all of a sudden, while we were patrolling, when we saw these, we were being shadowed by 3 or 4 planes. So naturally, when you're in the service, they teach you recognition signals, so you can silhouettes, so you can tell what kind of a plane, what kind of a ship, what's coming at you, get an idea. So each plane had its own silhouette. So there we are. This plane, so the skipper comes out on deck and he says, okay, what are they? Almost to a man, we said, B-25 Mitchell bombers. Instead, they were Mitsubishi twin-engine bombers called Betty all of them had a nickname, Betty, Val. It's sort of, like I say, they don't escape me right now, but the Betty bomber. And all of a sudden, we had, the skipper happened to be on the right-hand side, the starboard, and the executive officer was on the port side. Now, when this man came on duty, he put the binoculars to his eyes and he never left them out. It took him away from his eyes for 4 hours because he was frightened. His name was Ridenauer. He was so frightened because he was torpedoed off a tanker. And it never, once you get torpedoed, you'd never forget that. You were always a little bit gun shy. So as he was looking around, he noticed one of those bombers drop a torpedo. So he screams, torpedo, and hard right rudder, starboard right rudder. Well, the skipper comes charging on. Who the hell gave that order? He says, torpedo. So naturally, when you get a torpedo, you aim bow towards it, not broadside, because you would give them too much of an angle of hit. And all of a sudden, I was off watch at that time. I was fire controlman, radar controlman. And as this bomber's coming up at us, he's firing, and I'm on the flying bridge doing this here. Like I said, this elbow, an arm was going to stop any bullet coming at us. But these things you do instinctively. You seem foolish after it's all over. You're a little frightened. You wonder, why the hell did I do something like that? So that was just another incident. At the time, we went to Amaru Island. Green Island is the Green Island group. It's still above the Shortland Islands, still going up to Solomon. See, we used to go up to Slot. Were you in the class when I talked the first time? You remember what I remember about the Slot? It was just a narrow passage through these islands. And you get these, couldn't get a battleship through there, but you could get the cruisers and destroyers. A Tokyo Express, you call it. We used to go there sometime, night after night, night after night, night after night. You always wonder, well, when is this going to stop? I mean, are there other ships around? Just us? So you always figure the law of averages are going to get you sooner or later. And that was the fateful night that we shot those two patrol planes, ours, PBYs, the Catalina flying boats. Like I explained the time when we get, you're in enemy territory, you can't put your identification, IFF, on. You've seen the scope in hospitals about your heartbeat, you see these things. Well, it's the same thing. Goes over your scope, the same thing, it comes up like that when you got IFF on. But in enemy territory, you can't use that because the Japanese planes spot that. They pick that up, that pick to you, if you got it. So it comes in just like this. It comes in at you on your radar scope as a torpedo plane. Dead night. See, dive bombers don't work in the nighttime, but torpedo planes can. Well, especially when they see this phosphorus. It's like a state highway, an interstate highway. They'll follow you right up there and they'll lay a bomb right across you. And so there we are. This plane's coming down in on us. So naturally, put to general quarters, fired, knock one down. 10 minutes later, we knock another one down. Not realizing at that time, on the way back after firing around the Shortland Islands, bombarding, we came back and picked up these survivors. But none of us would be saying, oh, we were the guys that shot you down. You couldn't very well say that. I mean, friendship is friendship. But talk about friendly fire, that's exactly what happened, friendly fire. So we went up there, and then we went to Buka. We were assigned with a mine layer to lay mines outside of Buka. It's above Bougainville. It's a small island off of Bougainville. But see, Rabaul, the Japanese bastion, it was a mammoth place, and that's where most of their shipping came from. And we see, you work with these coast watchers. They're usually New Zealanders or Australian, and they always radio that, say, 40 planes coming down, or they'll say, coming your. They try to use as few words as possible, because Japanese home on radio signals. They tell you when something was coming down. Anyway, we were this here mine layer and us. Now we were working in shallow water because you get at the, pedometer is beating like heck because the destroyer has a 10-foot draft. 10 feet of us are underwater. And you cannot, cruiser could never make it in there because they have approximately 15, 18, 20 feet of draft. So we're on there, we can just, pedometers going 12, 11, 13, 14, 11, you know, we're just a foot above shoals. So we're scared as hell. You're coming down, and then all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, the mine layers laying mines, and this flare shoots out. This flare comes down, and it come down like, I swear to God, it was on a clothesline. It never seemed to drop it. And we knew what was happening. There's spotter planes. So he's radioing the main task force, Japanese task force, figuring that we're the kind of a splinter group, with thinking us we were a cruiser and the mine layer being a destroyer. We're part of the task force that's maybe hanging around the place. So the Japanese force is zeroing in on us, coming on to head us off. We're coming down this way, the Japanese fleet is coming this other way. And all of a sudden they start firing star shells. Just when that happened, we got, our code name was Rex at that, or no, Coke. And Rex was a big task force. Coke, did we need any help? And he says, yes, we're being attacked now by spotter plane that's starting to throw star shells. So he says, okay, get out of there as fast as you can. And by this time, we had about 6 cruisers and 7, 8 destroyers coming up. And we asked them if they needed any help. And you almost want to say, quiet, we want to get out of here. We don't want to get no engagements, because all your engagements are at night. Surface engagements usually at night. Very rarely does it happen in the daytime, unless you catch an orphan kicking around a Japanese ship or something like that. But your air fighting happened in the daytime. It's like a panorama watching a movie. You almost feel detached. You're watching a movie. You see these planes coming in, you see the dog fights, they're suiciding on these carriers, and it's all around you. The ships are whistles blowing and guns are firing. The sky is black with shrapnel and powder puffs and things like that. And it's like watching a movie until, like I say, we went like this 3 years. Watching all these engagements happening, we're firing guns and planes are being knocked down, and some of them, especially around Green Island, this was the real panoramic thing I've ever seen. While we were out there firing, you see this P-39 got hit almost right alongside of us, picking up the pilots. These planes that were being shot down, Japanese, both, and it was, you can't believe this thing is happening. Don't forget, we're only 21, 22 years old. Some were even younger than I was. Younger, and never been away from home. We're scared half to death. And all this thing is happening and going on and on and on. And it's like I say, the times when we went to Ormoc Bay, when we caught this Japanese submarine on the surface. He's coming in the same time we're going, both going in at the same time. And he's waving at us thinking we're a Japanese ship. Because you don't have your standard, it's not sticking out your American flag or Japanese flag, it's not sticking out of there by a long shot. So naturally you start firing like heck, and they're demoralized. But like I say, you're going at a speed of approximately, again, 38 knots, because you're going into, because our troops were stalemated in Ormoc Bay. And like I say, there's a case of point with another mistake. Going in, around, coming back, as soon as now the submarine was sunk, it fired a small arm fire at us and all that kind. And we're coming back out, Captain shut off the motors so we could not chew these poor guys up in the water. But you get these screws that go in at 30-something knots, it'll chew them just like a blender. Getting out of that thing too. And then we went in there 5 nights in a row. We were being shadowed by dive bombers, torpedo planes and all. We knew they were not ours. We used to work with the PT boats, like Arleigh Burke's and the PT boats. And incidentally, that's one of the PT 109 was in that group with Arleigh Burke. we operated. I didn't know it was Jack Kennedy at that time. John Kennedy, I had no idea. But they'd warn us that the ships are coming in or something like that, so we'd have to get out of there. If we catch transports or something, okay. But destroyers are hit and run. To fight another day. So we went 3, 4, and the 5th night we were relieved. And the Cooper and another destroyer went in. That's when we got, see, I was working in CIC. When I was not on the radar, we catch all these communiques coming in. We could tell what's happening. We would read the communiques after the skippers read them and all that. How the Cooper went down with a heavy loss of life. I think they lost 3/4 of their crew. And we knew what happened. When you're going at 38 knots, you get a torpedo in the bow. You go down just like a submarine, but down like heck. Then you're in enemy territory. What do you do at that time? So like I say, we did a lot of bombarding. Saipan was one of our worst. We were a good firing ship. We were a good fighter. We had a director man, fighter director man, by the name of Hancock. To be honest with you, to look at him, he looked like he didn't know enough to get out of the rain. But he was uncanny. If you give him the proper ranges and bearings, we were always called upon. See, the Japanese in these hills had their guns on tracks. They would come out and fire. When they finished firing, they'd draw back in. But you had to hit the opening, the cave opening, which it really was like, was a cave opening. And these ships would be firing and firing and firing, and they'd be going all over. So you got one of these little Cessnas, small planes. They were spotters. So they'd get up there and they'd give you a grid for the fire. So as this spotter is spotting, you fire salvos, fire one, then he'll give you left 100 or right 100, down 200, and you fire another one until he knows where you're hitting. Then they say no change, then you start firing, firing, and firing, and firing. See, another mistake happened. By the time he got us the grid and we started to fire, the troops had moved forward, so you're not in the grid anymore. They're in the grid we're going to fire, and our troops are in the grid we're going to fire on. So we're firing like crazy, and so it's just cease fire, cease fire, cease fire. See, another mistake, like I always said, war is not an exact science at all. Between our shooting down 2 of our own planes, firing in our own troops. But I say then that the French shell would always come in, and this Hancock would hit those caves like crazy. We were always called upon when nobody else could hit it. And I would say, okay, Renshaw, do your stuff, and we'd go in there and get these bodies in the water. That's the worst carnage I've ever saw in my life, was Saipan. Where, see, not alone, but our soldiers were floating belly up and face down, the Japanese included, women and children, because propaganda had them that we were going to do all sorts of horrible things to them if they were captured. So consequently, they didn't feel like they wanted to be subjected to something like that. So they committed suicide. They kept jumping off these mountains into the water, and water in the body. It was just like, say, you can walk off of that ship without getting your feet wet, And it was horrible. Like I say, even something could be comical if there's such a thing. I went on the flying deck at that time, looking down, and would you believe it, when my spy glasses hit it, was a Japanese facing face up with his face all chewed out with white, you know. And for lunch, we had chicken a la king, if you know what chicken a la king is. Chicken, shredded chicken with a white sauce. Well, it reminded me of that Japanese face facing me up. Then, after so much of that, we made the land. That's when we started up to the Philippine Islands, when we started seeing the suicide planes. They were the most horrible thing imaginable. And I can't imagine the intelligent race that Japan was, as is today, that you could brainwash hundreds of young guys and tell them you're going to get a one-way trip. You got to hit a ship. Could you picture your teacher telling you to do that? What possessed them? I mean, what mind-boggling these, talking brainwashing these poor kids. They were young, 19, 20-year-old kids too, drinking the sake, and they're going to go on a one-way trip. Like I say, then it was in Lady Gulf where we first got our suicide planes coming down. So St. Louis, right in front of us, got hit a couple of times. And then it's we different type of operations around, going out into the Sulu Sea and Surigao Straits and all that. Then all of a sudden we were making the landing and bombarding off of the Philippines when the USS Laffey caught 7 suicide planes. We've had near hits, near misses and stuff like that, bombs dropping, torpedoes under us, planes like off of Bougainville. You can see these planes are going, as the ship was going like this, the bombs were dropping down because we were making the landing at Empress Augusta Bay. And covering all that there, these planes came over, oh God, they were all different types of colors, purple, blue, red. I never saw anything. What was the object of those planes having that kind of colors? That was a mystery to me. But they were trying to, I didn't even know why, first time I saw what strafing was like, it was little spatters in the water, you know, like, in fact, they're strafing us, you know. And you get a ship like I was on, only 1/2-inch steel, it'd go right through the deck. And it hit any powder magazines or anything like that, it was a frightening thing. I say, but the Japanese were very awe-stricken about our, they call it the American ingenuity. We could make a landing, and within an hour, our gun emplacements are up and we could start firing. But the Japanese would take days before they can get their stuff together, you know, they get their revments and everything in order to have the gun emplacements. We can go, as soon as they made a land, we can go in within the next couple of hours and just pulverize them, because they were never prepared. They were always surprised when we made a landing, they came over, we were already starting a fire at them. See, we had a very ingenious way of attacking, and when you're making your land, see, I made all the landings. I missed Tarawa and I missed Okinawa and Iwo Jima because I'm getting to this final story of our torpedoing. Final story. It's in there, it says what's my most memorable. It was a beautiful day. We had made the Lingayen landing in the Philippine Islands, and we came back, we always call it the milk run. We're way back the firing lines. We had picked up supplies and ammunition and stuff like that, all LSTs, transports, and we were, see, we're always we're bringing destroyers protect the convoy. It was the most gorgeous day in the world. The sky was blue, sunny, water was just like glass. And we were going through a narrow channel, and it was off of Mindoro, just to get into the Sulu Sea. Just approaching that, we knew there used to be a submarine there because the USS Cavalier was a cargo ship the day before got torpedoed there. And so we were kind of conscious of sub laying up. See, but sonar has a fault. When the sub is close to the shore, you're hitting rock will give you an echo back too. Doppler give you an echo back. As it's pinging back and forth, as the louder the back ping comes, the higher it comes, the closer you're getting. See, when it starts to fade, it means that you went over them, you lost them, and you're fading away from them. So that's why you can lay your hedgehogs and your ash cans, we call them, depth charges, get them down. So anyways, a beautiful day. You can see the bougainvillea flowers, white picket fence, orange thatched roofs of these plantations, one on each side. You swore you could spit and hit one just by spitting. But see, the convoy is so slow, a destroyer has to go in and out, so you don't outrun the convoy. You're going only 6 knots. That's about 7.5 miles an hour. You could walk faster than that, see? And we're slowing up, and all of a sudden, one of the officers screams, "Torpedoes!" One was coming for the bow, and one was coming for the fantail. That's where I was sleeping. We had just gotten off of the 4 to 8 watch. And I was talking to all these guys on deck. Being Italian, they still like to hear me speak some Italian words, kind of make them laugh a little bit. And I had a poem that rhymed in Italian. And they still like to hear me say that. We didn't have too many. We had Italians aboard the ship, but not too many. And it's also these guys that I was just talking to. And then I went down to lie down. I must have gone to bed about 9 o'clock, 9:30, because sometimes you get a cup of coffee and a little breakfast, then you hit the sack until your next watch. Sometimes you're on 4 on, 4 off. And I just hit that sack, and like I say, it was a beautiful day. And at 11:15, they saw the torpedoes. That's where I was sleeping, over the 3 and 4 and 5 magazine. And when it was going to hit the bow, it was 1 and 2 magazines, the powder and shells and everything. Well, anyway, they saw the torpedoes. They put the annunciators up as fast, as quick as they could, but it only picked up another knot or two, that would enough that the one that was going to hit in the fantail where I was sleeping missed, and the one that was going to hit the bow caught us directly amidships, directly in the center. After fire room, forward engine room, ship dead in the water. We didn't know. I jumped off of that sack and fell down. The noise was something you could never duplicate with a drum, with a tub. There's no sound like a torpedo hitting a ship. It seemed like Almighty God just picked it and shook it and slammed it down again. And all we thought was a suicide plane hit us. And still we didn't know. We jumped out and we closed our watertight integrity doors. That's the first thing you do with it. You're taught right off the bat. Any kind of a hit, shut your doors, lock them, close them tight. Even if you're trapping yourself inside, that's the main thing. Watertight integrity. Otherwise, it'll flood all the compartments, and you go down like a stone, like a brick. So we did close all the doors, put up our bunks, and we sat down on our bunks. We hear the water slushing. And nobody is saying a word. There's about 30, 40 guys down below there, and not a word was spoken. And we're all sitting there, and the thought that's going through my mind was not me. Not me at all. I was thinking about my parents, because I was the only son they had. And I was just thinking, they're going to get a telegram and say, "We regret to inform you." I mean, we had so much sadness in my family that it's all they needed this. Their only son is gone. Like I say, that was my thought. But we waited, and nothing happened. And then somebody said, "Hey, come on." He says, "We're not going down, that's for sure. Let's get out of here." So we opened the doors, and we see the sun shining through the portholes and top side, the hatches. And that came my turn to get up there. And it was Officer Katz. He was stark naked, but for a piece of, must have had the skivvies on, shorts. Just the band and a shred of part of the, and his head was bashed in, and his arm was swollen, and his blood was pouring down him, and he's calling, "God, help me somebody, help me somebody." And so the rest, we jumped down, got the stretchers and bring them. That's when we were starting going up the port side, because we got hit on the starboard side, which is the right side of the ship. And the decks were all swollen, the stacks were pushed down, the torpedo tubes were all blasted, all askew. And so we still thought it was a suicide plane. It couldn't, because that's what was the main thing at that time. Suicide planes were running rampant, never dreaming we got torpedoed. And going around the other side, you see, you go up starboard and you come down port. Because during combat, during action, when you go into general quarters, you want to be bumping into people coming one way and you're trying to go the other way, and guns are firing over your head. And so these guys are going up one starboard, up port and down starboard. When we came on the starboard side after we were bringing these guys into the wardroom, that's the only place you could put them at that time, because the tables, you know, lay them on there. When we saw the carnage, how the ship was open like a can was open, just blasted right out. And we saw guys in the water, bodies all over the deck, pieces and arms and legs. And we say before we can, so the other ships naturally keep the submarine down so they don't come up fire another shot, because we were dead in the water as it was. And we got that our duty was right there, get the plastic bags and start getting these guys up, they're dead. And one guy, Minton was his name, he come out of that pile of burning, the steam was so hot. We lost most of the men through inhaling live steam. The bodies just, there was a mark on them, but they were turned all blue with lungs filled with hot steam. And this one guy, Minton, had a shipmate on his shoulder crawling over this hot cables, because you get 600 pounds of hot steam. But everything said, then the force of the torpedo made everything so hot to touch. You couldn't even stand on the deck with your shoes on. And it was so hot. That's what it was, so hot. And he's crawling over these cables, getting out with this guy on his back. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And he was no bigger than I was, but he had this guy on his shoulders and bringing him out of there. And then the job of picking up pieces and bodies and put them in bags and try to say what's going to be happening here now. And like I say, that took a couple of days, and then they wouldn't even let us bury our dead. They wouldn't let us go to shore. So we had to do the burial at sea thing. Put a 5-inch shell between their legs so they'd sink the bottom. And we did that. It took a couple of days to pick all these parts. And in fact, even it was days after that we were still on the trying to, because every time a plane flew over, you're dead in the water and you're helpless. So you go to your battle station, especially when nobody would sleep down below anymore, but this big hole in us of 19, 20 feet, and right to the keel, cracked us right in half. The only thing we had was one propeller shaft and one plate holding us together. They tried to tow us back to the Lady Gulf, tried to tow us back. A seagoing tug tried to tow it, but they're so wide bowed that as he was slapping against the ship, we needed that, like the proverbial hole in the head. The ship was going like this here, or creaking and groaning, and the skipper would give the order to abandon ship. Well, I don't know, maybe a couple of guys might have jumped, but half of us guys didn't know how to swim. We didn't know how to swim because we only had 4 weeks of basic training, and things were going so bad out in the Pacific, we didn't have time anymore. We were going through classes to learn how to swim. It was too late. We had to shove us out. And like I say, finally they gave the abandoned ship 3 times. Our pumps started shorting out. We couldn't pump the water out anymore. And we started going down. And after out of a clear blue, I can't say clear blue sky, dead of night, a voice came over and says, "Hello, Coke, this is Xavier. Are you Catholic?" Now, you've heard of Saint Xavier. Said, "This is Xavier. Can we be of assistance? We're your distress call." He said, "Well, I don't know what you can do. They've tried to pump us out, but we're losing ground." He said, "Well, let us come alongside because we just fresh from the States. We got brand new pumps and hoses." He said, "Well, come along." Gee, within about 3 minutes, this big DE pulls alongside, throws the pumps over and start pumping us out. You can see almost precipitously how the ship was starting to come up. Because we were down throwing stuff out, the water was up to our knees. And we were throwing flour, beans, ammunition, everything in the water to give us more buoyancy. Because it was just dead weight, try to get that stuff all out. Well, little by little, they started towing us back into Lady Gulf. And during the night, we were all sleeping on deck. This big PBM, it's a big Mariner, Martin Mariner they call them, big flying boat, zoomed right over us. Well, talk about fear again. Don't tell me we're dead in the water. Half our guns couldn't fire. And that was that night. Then they put us in dry dock, and they cut us all in half and took all the junk they put in the bottom ship for buoyancy. Took us in the river so she wouldn't be too light, she wouldn't go back and forth like a... And as we were going back, water got in the firebox for some reason or other. With firebox, it's just like you're lighting a fireplace or something. Without that firebox to fire off your boilers, you can't move. So there we are, dead in the water with one other destroyer escorting us back. We're supposedly going back to the States. And we start to list. A destroyer can take a 70-degree list, and that's all. Once she hits 70 degrees and she goes one more degree, she capsizes. Because you've lost ships in typhoons, and typhoon in the Pacific, hurricane in the Atlantic. And they caught that, the firebox that time, they just kept listing over. Finally she just went at that kill, she started coming back up again. Well, that happened a couple of times. Then one night, we were all asleep, being told, we thought we were safe, when we got a big booming sound. Lifted the ship, you could feel the ship lift up. Like I told you, we're 19, 18, 20-year-old guys. Sounds of panic was the worst thing I'd ever heard in my life. Even myself, I was trying to stifle a scream, fear, but you could hear it coming out of there. You're trying to go like this because you still wanted to be brave, although you were frightened to death. Guys were jumping on your back. Everybody was trying to get out at the same. There was no order. It was mayhem, chaos. People trying to get out, guys trying to get out at the same time. Right away, the first all night, we got torpedoed again. Instead, we had got a submarine contact and dropped a 500-pound depth charge off the back, because you'd get certain ways a 500-pound bomb to lift the fantail of your ship right up. So consequently, we finally got back to the States. My war ended. We were just getting ready to go to Iwo Jima when we got torpedoed. That was the 25th of February, 1945. And discharged at Lido Beach, New Jersey, at December 12th of 45. That's Fine, final.
Yeah, a couple more for you. How would you say your ship's equipment compared to the Japanese?
Well, we had radar, which at the beginning they didn't have very little of. The radar was quite inferior to ours, but they had fantastic torpedoes. We had a lot of duds. If you even didn't notice it in the Atlantic, our submarines would fire at a ship and no explosion. It would just bump into it and make a hole. But that's about all. It never exploded. And they were greatest pyrotechnicians with, firing or flares, star shells. They were great at that. They were great torpedo men. They could fire a spread of torpedoes that you couldn't get away with. Couldn't get out of its way. They were very good at that. But their ship design was a little bit bad. They had high structure. They were very prone to capsizing in heavy seas. I'd seen carriers in a typhoon that the planes would roll right off the deck into the water. We lost 2 tin cans in a typhoon. We were told we were too far out to get back in, but we managed to make it. But a couple never managed to make it. Once you capsize, you lose so many men. Because there's coffin right in the bottom.
Um, what were some of the most interesting or inspiring things that you experienced during your service?
Yeah, well, like I say, it was, human nature's funny. You always kind of, you're looking for laughs and good times. There's a clown in every group. There's a clown in every group. I don't care where, like I say, your fellas are, you hang around with 5 or 6 or 7 guys, there's always one that makes you laugh. You always kind of look for them to boost your spirits. We always had those guys all the time, and they were funny. They were really, they should have been comics, stand-up comics. They were so funny, and especially those Southern boys. Southern boys they had a way about them. They had funny drawls, and they could say jokes with a deadpan. They never a quirk of a smile. But like I say, outside of our liberties and fun and different towns and laughter, and just like now I got my top of my uniform in there. Believe it or not, when I pulled that out, I got the strangest feeling. When I put it away, I haven't touched that uniform in 60 years. And when I took it out, I felt it in my hand. And this is not meant to be sacrilegious or anything. I told my wife, it felt like the Shroud of Turin. Really, it gave me an awful, not an awful, a queasy feeling. And I felt that the material, and looking at my bronze stars and my medals, and I couldn't. I said, gee, I says, what a feeling this thing gave me. It was an awful thing, like taking it out of a crypt or something, like being what do they call it when you're exhumed, the word. I'd like to say it was, I can't think of any special thing. Like say my worst experience naturally was the torpedo. We never, because it was for 3.5 years, you're running around, it's like say torpedoes underneath you, bombs missing us, planes shooting at us, and it's like a big movie. And then suddenly you get hit and it's stark reality. And I say, my God, these guys aren't fooling. They're not fooling at all. Is that thing still voicing me? Or because I wanted to say so. Funny thing that was a little off color, that's why. No, not really off color, but you got to visualize the fact that, you know what an obsessive compulsive is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was. When I was home, everything I touched, I was washing my hands 100 times a day. Everything I touched, wash my hands. Well, my parents were going crazy. And then when war broke out and I was going to join in, what's going to happen to my son? I hope you're going to edit some of this. And so I was still very obsessive about things and touching this. And and I'd have to, when I went to go to the bathroom, I had to wait till everybody got out of the place. Everybody had to get out of the place because I didn't want them to see that I had to wipe everything off and all. And then, like I say, this went on week after week, month after month, and it's a good thing it never was an emergency. Well, one day, everybody cleared out, and I was there all by myself, and boom, a big noise, and the ship lurched. Boy, it ran up your pants and ran out. And there we are. Guys are sunning themselves on the deck, and it was a beautiful sunny day. Oh, so the Japanese bomber came over, and he dropped a 500-pounder, but he lost his nerves. He was just about coming up close because he thought we were waiting for a dead hit. Waiting for that dead hit when he lost his nerve. He dropped the bomb a little too soon, the 500-pounder, and we didn't even know he was there. Never saw him. So that's when I sat down and myself, I says, I'm going to die. And I'm worried about some disease or sickness or something dirty. That's when I got cured. I never was an obsessive compulsive again. So what if any doctor wants to know if somebody's an obsessive compulsive, just to get a good shock, that'll snap them right out of it in a damn hurry. And I never forgot that. Now, not that I'm a pig, but I'm not going to let something touching a worm or that I got to. So when you can't wash them, just wipe your hands real good and eat your sandwich. Forget about it.
Who would you say are the people that you remember best from your service?
Best? Well, yes, we had Dick Wenzel, Queenie, and we had the guys who just were at my reunion in St. Louis, October the 3rd to the 6th. So when you saw these, I got pictures of when they were young boys. Then when you go to reunions after about 50 years, you see all these pot-bellied guys, and you try to, this you? I mean, it's really, it's a strange feeling. But Dick Wenzel was one of my better. Bill Connell, he's dead. He was fun. He was one of those clowns. Bill Connell, Sid Lavender. I can always remember the poor dead guys. 19 dead. I could run the list sometimes at night. Guys that you just spoke to half an hour ago. Just spoke to. Nice young kids. Some were 18. See, the irony of the whole thing is, when we went to San Francisco, 1944, went to San Francisco, if you had somebody on shore that had your rating, you could switch. If he wanted to come aboard and you wanted to go on shore, that we would switch. So we caught about 14, 15 of those guys that wanted to know, they wanted to see action, you know, the patriotism and all that thing, they wanted to see some action. Well, some guys had the ratings matched, and they went. They got off, and these guys came on. And those, unfortunately, the irony of the whole thing, were the ones that got killed. They're firemen, ship fitters, steam fitters. The black gang we call snipes, the water tenders, oilmen. And there were some who were only 18 years old. Blair was one of them, 18, Dutch electrician. All the men that died, you see, the irony. See, I spent 22 months in the Solomon Islands with 11-month break, 11 months. They sent us to Sydney, Australia for 10 days. And then another 11 months we put in the Solomons before we went to the Marianas, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, and the Philippines. And the Pacific, see, I'm not bitter about it, but I never had a chance, say, to go to Hong Kong or there was nothing. Where was I going to go? Singapore? China? We were at war. But you got the guys in, you know how many men that I know, friends of mine that were in the Army, that never saw action by the time they got to New York. The war was over. But they went to Paris, London, and all these beautiful places that I would never see in a million years. Not that I can go, but my wife's horribly afraid of flying over water. But I say that I'm very proud of my service time. Like I say, I belong to the VFW. That the other sign over the bar that says, never mind how much it costs to join. Remember what it costs to be eligible.
Looking back on the war and your service in it, what do you think it all means?
What I think about?
What do you think it all means, the war?
What it all means?
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, this was not a Vietnam nor a Korea. Like almost people will say we had no business there. But there are other ramifications, other variables that you got to consider. We were full of patriotism. We got attacked. See, could we have gone to war after the World Trade Center? If we knew who they were at that time, what country we could really nail it for it. Yes, we could have, but we don't know. They were scattered all over the world. But see, Japan, but there again, if you really knew the real story, it was trickery. We got stabbed in the back, yes. But if you read the real chronicles of what happened, we knew Japanese being ready to attack us. We did nothing about it, because Roosevelt wanted so badly to get into that war. See, but he couldn't go unprovoked. Hey, we're gonna just go in there, well, hey, mind your own business. See, they couldn't. He had to have a reason. But unfortunately, it was a high price to pay. About 2,800 men at Pearl Harbor because we had a reason, a provocation. See, that's so sad. Like I said, but Vietnam, I feel so bad for those guys because I would not have wanted to have been in that war. Studs Terkel wrote the book, The Good War. He didn't say the big one. He called it the good war. Because there were certain rules, there were certain things, we knew our enemy. But see, in Korea and Vietnam, you didn't know your enemy. They all look alike. They could tell us who we were. But don't forget you were fighting North and South Korea, North and South Vietnam. Who the hell did who can you tell who's who? You had little 5-year-olds throwing grenades at you. Then you turn your AK-47 at them and you can kill kids. See, we come from a civilized country, and you're always a little hesitant. And that little hesitation, sometimes you lost your life. See, and that's why I wouldn't want to have been in that war for no amount of money. I mean, not that you got paid, like say, if I had to be thankful being a patriot, I'm glad I wasn't the big one, World War II. At least I knew the ground rules. I knew who we were fighting. But that's, shoot.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think I rambled on for quite a while here.
That's good stuff. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're just gonna get a couple.